The presentation that I would like to make is called Well-being in Kazakhstan, Evidence from the World Values Survey. And this is a preliminary research that we are doing together with my colleague and friend, Alma Kudebayeva, who is also present at this panel. She works at the KIMEP University. We want to expand this research and include other countries of Central Asia, such as Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, based on the data available through the World Values Survey. So, you know that this year we're going to celebrate 30-year independence of Kazakhstan, and we can actually see some improvements in different spheres of life in Kazakhstan. For instance, the GDP per capita has grown from 1,500 to 9,000 in 2019. Also, we observe that the poverty rate has been also reduced from 57% in 1996 to 8% in 2017. And the lifespan of people in Kazakhstan also increased from 64 to 73 years over this period of time. So we, of course, observed that Kazakhstan made big strides to improve the well-being of people, but we also wanted to find out whether it is true and how the well-being of people changed over the period from 2011 to 2018. So the questions that we asked in our research were like, are people satisfied with their life due to these changes? And how has people's well-being changed over the last decade in Kazakhstan, and what factors can explain the change in well-being of people in the country? So we looked at the subjective well-being that is defined as the degree to which an individual judges the overall quality of his life as a whole favorably, while it largely depends on the social environment within which each person has been socialized and within which he or she lives. We used the subjective well-being in our model, and we measured it with a certain question from the World Values Survey, and I will talk about it a little bit later. So in terms of previous research, various scholars explored different factors that might influence people's well-being. One of the important factors was the GDP, the level of GDP, which was found that it is positively associated with welfare and well-being of citizens. So the higher the level of GDP, the higher the satisfaction with life among the population. But this was also kind of, you know, mixed or kind of contradictory factor, because other scholars didn't find any correlation between the two factors. Income also has been explored as one of the influential factors on the satisfaction with life among the population. But other scholars suggested going beyond the GDP factor and focus on non-material things such as, for instance, the impact of social networks, education, health, different freedoms. For instance, Engelhardt, who is one of the leading forces of social capital, the importance of social capital, he found that people who live in tolerant societies and have freedom of choice, they also are more satisfied with their life than those who don't have these liberties. Also, such factor as trust has been identified as one of the factors that might contribute to the well-being of people. Other factors that scholars in different contexts explore include age, health, education, gender. So for instance, if we look at the relationship between age and well-being, we see this U-shaped relationship when the level of life satisfaction is the lowest in the middle age. Good health is also positively influences, as well as the gender. It was found out that women demonstrate higher levels of self-supported reported happiness than men. So all these factors we also, of course, included in our model. In regard to the research on Central Asia, we observed the gap because there was some research done on well-being in the population, but mostly it was ethnographic research. So how people in Central Asia experience contentedness in their daily lives were explored by a number of scholars, but nobody looked at factors that define subjective well-being in Kazakhstan, and particularly no statistical models were found. I think that just recent research has been done, for instance, by Kanat, who also talked about subjective well-being. So this methodology that we used in our paper is based on the data from the World Value Survey. In fact, because the new data has been released just in 2018 or 2019 in Kazakhstan, we decided to use the the data from these two surveys, 2011 and 2018. So the sample size in wave 6 was 1,500 and in wave 7, 1,200. And in our studies, the dependent variable is life satisfaction, which was measured by the question, all things considered, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole now? And respondents had to choose on a scale from 1 to 10 as 1 dissatisfied and 10 dissatisfied. So in our study, the goal was to identify the change of subjective well-being in Kazakhstan by quantifying comparative significance of the changes in the predictors of life satisfaction. And we used the Oaxaca blind decomposition model. This approach permits to decompose the well-being gap between the wave 6 and wave 7 observations and to detect the range to which changes over time in the levels and in the coefficients of life satisfaction predictors explains the well-being gap. So this model has been used in different studies, including research on subjective well-being. That's why my colleague Alma and I decided to use this model. So the variables that we included in our research include important explanatory variables that we, of course, took from the literature, such as financial satisfaction, household income, social capital, and social capital particularly has been measured in terms of 3 proxies, such as index of civicness, trust in people, and social participation. And you see also all other variables that were included in the model. So this is the model. I had to kind of reduce it because I could not put all variables on the screen on this slide. So you see here the important factors, important variables in terms of endowments and also in terms of coefficients. So our model showed that in general, we observe that subjective well-being in Kazakhstan has declined from 2011 to 2018. In other words, that people have become less satisfied with their life during this period, and we observe the decline. And the model, the Oaxaca blind decomposition, illustrates statistically significant reduction in subjective well-being for the period between 2011 and 2019 in Kazakhstan. And you see here the statistically significant factors such as financial satisfaction, freedom of choice, and university degree. So basically the idea is that freedom of choice decreased the gap of subjective well-being, thereby showing the importance of this factor for well-being in Kazakhstan. And during this period of time, people experienced the shrinkage of freedoms of choice and decrease in terms of control over their lives due to economic crisis that we had during this period, the devaluation of tenge. If you remember that we also had this event that affected negatively people's satisfaction with life. At the same time, we observe that such factors as financial satisfaction and education, in opposite, had positively influenced the difference in subjective well-being between 2011 and 2018. And those people who could improve their financial status and obtain education during this time feel themselves more satisfied compared to those people who were not able to improve their financial status as well as obtain education. So, that's why we made this conclusion that these factors, freedom of choice, financial satisfaction, and education, can make people more satisfied with their life in the context of Kazakhstan. And if you look at the second column of in terms of coefficients,
2 minutes left.
2 minutes, okay. So we observe also some difference. So since we don't have much time, I just want to say that maybe in conclusion that we also looked at the satisfaction satisfaction with life among people who are financially satisfied and who are financially dissatisfied. We also made this analysis, and we found out that subjective well-being has significantly declined for people who are financially dissatisfied. So in other words, we can see the difference in terms of satisfaction between financially satisfied and financially dissatisfied people. So this is kind of also an interesting finding. So in conclusion, I just want to say that it's important to make this disaggregate analysis in order to see that different social groups might experience different change in terms of their life satisfaction. And if we apply a uniform approach, it can gloss over important nuances that might exist on the ground. So that's why it's important to disaggregate. So the government of Kazakhstan should pay more attention to the provision of better quality education, provide more freedoms to people so that they felt themselves more satisfied with their life. And people also should be more engaged in social life, participate more in different associations in Kazakhstan, and be tolerant toward other citizens. So, and the government of Kazakhstan should also aim at the construction of a more liberal and inclusive society to improve people's well-being. So, this is it. So if you would have questions in regard to the models or maybe some variables, then you're welcome to ask.
Dear Dina, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I have a suggestion for all the participants. If we can gather questions after 2 presentations, and please keep your questions to a minimum so that we can have more time for discussion. Our next speaker is Professor Gulnaz Kazmukhambetova. Sorry for my pronunciation, from Eurasian National University. The floor is yours, Ms. Gulnaz.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So I'm just participating from 2 devices because of some technical issues. So I will turn on already prepared video. Could you please let me know if you can hear the voice of it or not? And I'm just turning it on. Just 1 second.
Gulnaz, you're muted.
Sorry, there is an issue with sharing screen. Organizer did not allow to share the screen. Could you please help with it?
Madi, Adil Khan, can you please make Professor Gulnaz, now you can share.
Okay. Oh, it still says that I cannot share. It says it's switched off. I'm sitting from 2 devices, maybe the second, like also named Gulnaz, can be opened. Okay, so I'm turning it on. Okay.
Gulnaz, you're muted.
Okay, just turn on.
No, now we can hear you.
See you.
Okay, I would suggest while you figure out the technical issues, can we invite the third speaker, please?
Hyesong.
Okay.
Meanwhile, you will try to figure out the technical issues, please.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Our third speaker is Professor Hyesong from our own school, Economic Shocks of COVID-19 in Kazakhstan. Professor Hyesong, floor is yours.
Okay, just a second. I shared this PPT. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Iftikhar. Just a second. Let me, because I'd better make. After that is I can okay. Now it works. Thank you for your patience. Okay, the topic is the economic shock of COVID-19 on labor market in the Kazakhstan case. The current pandemic due to the COVID-19 provided external shocks to the world economy, including Kazakhstan. For example, U.S. economy is the worst performance in 74 years, and while clocking the job market. And then this is in 8 decades, is the deepest global recessions. And the global real GDP focused contracted by 5.2% in 2020, and developing countries contracted by 2.5%. In Kazakhstan case, Kazakhstan small and medium-sized entrepreneurs is declined by 72% predicted. So we need to know to overcome the COVID-19, we need to see the COVID-19's characteristics, which means whether it is a permanent shock or temporary shock. So we need to know how much the potential output and natural unemployment rate are fluctuated due to this shock. Okay, the reason is that the policy tools and instrument should be different depending on what this recession is. For example, only due to the business cycle or a permanent shock. If it is due to a business shock, then we need the total demand policies, including money supply expansion. If this is a permanent shock, then we might need a policies decreasing natural unemployment rate itself, or we need to see about the structural change the structural stuffs. So then why it is important the natural unemployment rate? And in Kazakhstan case, only few local scholars pay attention on it, and only several articles I found, and then I couldn't find out any papers, some measuring natural unemployment and or the potential output ones. This is the Russian version papers, and Johnny Beck helped me to summarize this one. And this one is to discuss the main problem in the labor market, and then outline some factors. And Simonian and Nazarbayev studied the regional unemployment rate, and identified some factors that explain these issues in Kazakhstan regions. So they studied about the regional unemployment. Bakayeva scrutinized how state regulation decreased the level of natural unemployment rate, but only descriptive way. Polyakova applied Okun's law and studied the specific relationship between GDP and unemployment rate in Kazakhstan economy. So the issue of unemployment in Kazakhstan still requires thorough academic investigation, especially in this pandemic and recessions. So this research goal is to analyze a short-run or long-run effect of COVID-19 on Kazakhstan economy using the Okun's law and GDP identity. Here's the three objectives. First, to estimate more correctly the time-varying natural unemployment rate and then potential output in the Kazakhstan economy. So we're going to set up the extended unobserved component model, including Okun's law, and then run a space model with the Kalman filtering and Kalman smoothing to estimate this model. And then as far as I know, this is the first estimation, first trial to estimate Kazakhstan economy's natural unemployment and potential output. Second, to predict the short-term and long-term effect of the COVID-19 on the various factors, such as the labor force participation rate, employment rate, productivities, hours of working, etc. We're going to using extended GDP identity and run regression models with the detrended stationary factors and outputs. And we conducted a simulation to this C-19 recession period. And depending on the result, we try to draw the meaningful policy implication and examine effective policy tools. Okay, then what is the Okun's law or GDP identity? Okun's law is 1962. The Okun's introduced these ideas. One of a popular method focusing on employment rate. This method is the first to estimate the relationship between the unemployment rate and the total output according to Okun's law, and then the predict unemployment rate volatility depending on the total output's volatility. So this is the popular because of the stable relationship between GDP gap and unemployment. Usually we know this 2 or 3% of GDP decreased by 1% increase in unemployment rate. Still very well utilized and very popular in especially in business cycle studies and labor market economy, especially in the recession period. And developing countries, Okun's coefficients are known as half as large as advanced countries. This was 2016's estimate. And GDP identity is this kind of equations as you see. GDP identity, the Q is the output, such as the GDP, is decomposed into several factors. For example, employment rate, E over L. L is the labor force participation, and E is employment. Labor productivity, which is the Q, output over employment times and H, which means the input. And then labor force participation rate is L over N, N is the population. Hours per employee, H, and Palos H over 15. But we're going to use the extended GDP identity. Only difference we have some upper subscript B because of a business cycle. The reason is that this productivity only non-farm private sector business measured, and H, labor hours, also were non-farm business sector measured. And then this additional mixed effect is that the change, whenever there is a change in the ratio of total output per civilian employee, Q over E, to the same ratio in the non-farm private sector. So we're going to use this extended GDP identity. So then we're going to use the set up the model, empirical model, the extended UCM. What is the UCM? UCM is the unobserved component model. I included many scholars. And UCM is a widespread used method that separates non-stationary time series variables having a unit root into a trend component and then cyclical component. So the observable time series variable can be divided into two unobservable components, which is the stochastic trend component determined by random walk series, and another one is a cyclic component determined by the stationary series. So if you think about the business cycle, the economy coming back, we call this a stationary. So if this is a random walk, if you are drunk, then too much drunk, then you cannot found out your home and you are straight. We don't know where to go. This is random walk. We're going to use the extended UCM to set up a trend component, the cyclic component, and then we connected them with the price equation, inflation equation, and wage equation. And then we added this occurrence law equation, and then estimated simultaneously. For more detail, we set up this one is the total output YT log transformed, empirically known as a unit root, and it's separated into random walk component. This is YT trend means, and then stationary component. This is cyclic component. This is just a statistical content, and then this YT, the trend component only expressed as a random walk. Why is the random walk? This YT minus T is the coefficient is bigger than 1. It follows the random walk. If it's the coefficient is less than 1, it is converged. So which means when shock WT is given, then the shock will be converged.
4 minutes left.
Oh, okay. And then so this is pi and theta is a lag operator. And then WTET is a permanent innovation shock and a temporary innovation shock. The second equations is the unemployment rate. It's a similar idea. Unemployment also have a trend part and cyclic part, and then set up these models. Because of the time limit, I'm going to briefly explain. And then, but this is only 1 and 2. 1 is only statistical context. There's no economic validity or efficiency. So we're going to put in the labor price equations, which is only cyclical component affected the inflation rate. This is the Cotton's idea, and then they use these kind of things. And then this is also applied in the wage rate. So we put the economic the theories here, and then we put in the occurrence law, this one, and then we have extended UCM is using this one. The methodologies, in order to estimate this using the state space model, we need to specify it. So equation 3 is Arma 2, equation 7 is Arma 1, and Arma 8 also Arma 1, and then 9 is the occurrence law. We are more specify temporarily. We need set up this way. Then we can make this measurement equation and then transfer equation. The measurement equation is this one is observable variables, and this is unobservable variable. We call the state variable. And then the transfer equation on observable variables, how to change it, the movement of specify the movement. And then estimate using the MLE is simultaneous with the Kalman filtering and Kalman smoothing. And this is a GIT is each effective cyclic component, which is the productivity, employment rate, and then labor force participation such as. And then this is only cyclical component because we detrended. And then this is also a detrended GDP output. And then we can run the regression, this one. And then we're going to simulate it in this pandemic period. And then we're going to see how much they have a shock. The data, you need for the states model, four variables we needed. To the regressions, we need this 8 variables we needed. Data problems, availabilities, I only tried hard, but only have several data, and then missing one. And then as far as we know, the recession period in Kazakhstan economy, three times after 2001 is a financial crisis, and then oil crisis, Russian shutdown, and then a current one, pandemic one. And this is a preliminary result. I only have 57 observations so far, and then this is the one, and this is this data doesn't have any seasonal adjustment, and then only nominal. I didn't change it in the real one. And then as you can see, you have some trend, and then a cyclical. This is a low GDP output, and the employment rate, and then productivities, and then the labor force participation index. I don't have much time to provide more detailed output. This is only preliminary. I need more collected data, and then I can see the more convinceable output. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Hyesong. I think we have two presentations. So if there are any questions, we can take questions now.
Iftikhar, sorry, I don't want to intrude in your sharing duties, but we are way behind schedule. We have several more presentations, so it would be better to make sure that everybody presents and whatever time is left is kept for the Q&A, because otherwise presenters will not have a chance to do it. Okay, thank you, Riccardo. Professor Hyesong, if you can stop sharing your screen, we will move forward. Our next speaker is Dr. Kanat Abdulla from our own school, and he will be presenting on gender disparities in labor market outcomes in Kazakhstan. Floor is yours, Dr. Kanat Abdulla.
Thank you, Iftikhar, for giving me the floor. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. So, good morning, participants of the conference. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Kanat Abdulla. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at Graduate School of Public Policy. Today, I'm going to present a study about gender disparities in labor market outcomes in Kazakhstan, which is co-authored by Professor Riccardo Pelizzo. So this is a brief structure of the presentation, today's presentation. So first of all, I will talk about the motivation of the study, then go to the data, then discuss the main results of our study. Then I will summarize with policy implications. So why studying the gender inequality is important? So our study is motivated not only by our beliefs in principles of equality and fairness to all individuals, irrespective of their gender, but also by the fact that many studies have demonstrated that there are significant economic benefits from removing gender inequality, from promoting gender equality in labor markets. So these are some of them. For example, She et al. Investigates the racial and gender disparity in the United States and documents that the US economic growth, the contribution of the reduction in this gender inequality could contribute to the US economic growth. And another paper is a paper of mine, which was published in 2019 in the Journal of Macroeconomics. I investigate per capita income rises in Brazil and India when we remove the barriers to occupational mobility and human capital accumulation. So these were the motivations of our study. So this study is going to estimate the gender gap in the labor market of Kazakhstan. And we will show that there are differences in earnings and occupational distribution between men and women in Kazakhstan. We also try to answer the question, can this difference be explained by human capital, regional, and industrial allocation of labor? So data. So the main source of data source is labor force survey, which is collected by the Bureau of National Statistics of Kazakhstan. The time frame of our analysis is 2001 to 2018, so 18 years of annual data. And this table shows our observation across regional distribution of our observations. So as you see, the total number of observations exceeds 5 million. So it's quite a lot. And next table shows the gender distribution across skill types. So the main takeaway is that the 20% of observations in our sample have at least a college degree, at least university degree. So by high skill, we mean those who have university degree, at least university degree, sorry. And another takeaway is that women are more likely to get university education than men. So as you see from these numbers, the share of women who have a college, university degree is 21.5%, and the share of men who has the university degree is only 18.09%. So this is a table that shows the distribution of men and women across industries in Kazakhstan. So as you see, there are differences in in industrial allocation of workers across between men and women. So, for example, this, as you see, this number 6.89 shows that 6.89% of males work in mining sector, and only 1.85% of females work in this sector. And in construction, 8.42% of males work in construction, and only 2.47% of females work in construction. And more than 20% of females work in the education sector. And 15.83% females work in trade sector, whereas this number for females is very low, is 8.56. So the main takeaway from this table is that there are differences in industrial allocation of labor between men and women. Now let's go to the results. So this table shows the wage gap estimations. So the dependent variable is log earnings, okay, logarithm of earnings, and we estimated the 4 different models. And the first, our baseline case, we added the independent variables, following independent variables: a female dummy, age squared, and the categories for education. Our main coefficient of interest is this, minus 0.14, which is statistically significant, which is indicated by the 3 stars. And this shows that women's earnings are less than those of men's. So, for example, this number shows that women earn 14% less than men, comparable men. So in the next model, we add the marital status and number of children. See if this changes our. No, it didn't. It changed slightly only. Adding these variables decreased the gap only to 13.8%. In the next model, in column 3, we add the regional variation. We add the regional dummies. For example, this is the regional dummy, and this is dummy for rural workers. So you see that, for example, 13.5 means that the rural workers earn 13.5% less than comparable urban workers. And adding these variables didn't change much our main coefficient of interest. It only decreased to 13.6%. And in our last model, we add industrial fixed effects. And we also control for the self-employed workers. So you see that self-employed workers earn 7.7% lower than wage workers. And adding these variables actually decreases the gap in pay gap between men and women to 10%. Okay, so the wage gap estimation shown in the previous slide shows the estimations using data from 2013-2018. And as in the beginning of the slides, I said that we have data from 2001. So in order to use the full set of data, okay, we are going to construct another measure of labor market outcome, which is occupational distribution or occupational ranking. Okay, so now where do we get the ranking of occupation? So we use the mean occupational earnings to sort occupations, okay? And we rank occupations based on the mean occupational earnings. So this method is taken from this literature, Hendricks and Schulman. They use the occupation ranking to compare the occupations of immigrants and the natives. But there are other studies that use different methods. For example, these studies use the International Socioeconomic Index of Occupational Status to rank occupations. Okay, now let's have a look at our table again. So this is logistic regression estimations, and the dependent variable here is occupational ranking, okay? And this column shows the full set of control variables, female, dummy, age squared, years of schooling, the marital status, location of residence, regional fixed effects, number of children, etc. Okay, and we also add the year fixed effects in all these models. And the main coefficient of interest in this table is this, the negative 0.503. Okay, and this is statistically significant in all models. So this shows that the negative sign shows that the females log odds of being in high ranked occupations for females is lower than those of men. Okay, and we also calculated the odds ratio. Okay, this shows the probability of working in high ranked occupations for females is 0.60 times that of men. Okay, so for example, if this number goes to 1, that means that females working, the ranking of occupations where females work is similar to those of men. If it goes to 0, then the females work in lower ranked occupations compared to men. So so we have to look at this number. So in subsequent models, we divide our sample, for example, into 2, okay? The observations where workers work in male-dominated industries, this is this model, and those female-dominated industries. And we estimate separately for these two sample, okay? And we see that in male-dominated industries, likelihood of working in high-ranked occupations is lower for female compared to female-dominated industries. Okay, in female-dominated industries, we see that likelihood of working in higher-ranked occupations relative to men is higher than the male-dominated occupations. So women are less disadvantaged in female-dominated occupations. That's what it says. And then we divide our sample into, again, 2 samples: the workers with low skills and workers with high skills. Okay, and we see that women are disadvantaged in low skilled occupations. So as you see from this odds ratio, it's higher here than here. Okay, to summarize our findings, on average, women earn less than comparable men. The estimate of the earnings gap between men and women is statistically significant and equals 0.14, which means that in our baseline case, I showed you that women's earnings of women are 14% less than those of men, and the gap persists after controlling for many factors. The marital status, we add also control number of children, region, and location of residence, but it reduced to only 10% when we control for the industry fixed effects, which means that the employment by industry sector is an important factor in explaining the gender pay gap in the country. So another summary of our study is that we find on average women work in lower skilled and low paid occupations relative to men. So disparity in occupational status persists even in the female-dominated industries. So policy implications. Policies promoting gender equality in employment and career advancement in the workplace could have significant social benefits. I showed you the literature that shows this result. And women's status in the society, including representation in high managerial positions, should be reinforced. However, we have to admit that some amount of disparity may be persistent due to women's predisposition towards certain occupations and employment sectors. Of course, we have expanded discussion of policy implications in our paper. Thank you. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kanat Abdulla. Thank you very much. I think Dr. Gulnaz's presentation is ready. Madi, if you could kindly run the presentation. Madi, are you with us? I think we have lost Madi, so let him come back.
Sorry, I think Ms. Gulnaz is co-host in both cases, so I think she can share her screen.
Okay. Ms. Gulnaz, would you share your screen?
No, we agreed that Madi will, yes, will share.
But we have lost Madi now, so I think we will move and wait for Madi to reconnect. So the next presenter is Dr. Kamen Velichkov from International Science and Technology Center, Kazakhstan, presenting on nuclear governance as foreign policy asset. Please go ahead, Dr. Kamen, please go ahead. Yes, we can see your screen. But we can't hear you. Maybe you need to unmute yourself.
I believe you can hear me now.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Indeed, thank you very much to the organizers for this wonderful opportunity to attract the attention of the participants to matters pertaining to the foreign policy studies and some of the interesting findings that could be done against the examination of Kazakhstan's non-proliferation policy, a famous topic. This would entail a short introduction into the constructivist methods applied, certain consideration around the accumulated normative experience and expertise, alongside with the domestication of international treaties and conventions, as well as a reference to the acquired institutional framework on nuclear governance in Kazakhstan, to conclude with certain hypotheses about the behavior of middle-sized emerging power like Kazakhstan acts as on the international arena, both regionally, inter-regional relations, and globally. The empirical data comes from a project. It's an EU project which is conducted by the ISTC, the center I work for, in Africa. So it provides African perspective to the proof to the statements. And so to begin with the introductory remarks about the what kind of methodological approaches were examined. This would be a constructivist approach. One must say not the most oftenly used. We know that in RI theory, predominance definitely belongs to so-called realist or neo-realist approach, but occasionally and with greater convincing argumentation, constructivism finds its place. In more specifically, the model is belongs to Walter Carlsnise. It actually focuses on three phases of the individual foreign policy act, understood as a building block of the international relations, namely the intentional phase, meaning the actor's intention, the examination of the identity and predisposition of the actor vis-a-vis the objectives, and the reaction of the structure, that is to say, the reaction of the international system. Elizabeth Briggy and Christopher Hill went on to devise something which is also known as the strategic relational model. The most important contribution of them would be the fact that they really managed to prove that reality provides instances whereby the action blurs together ends and means of foreign policy. In other words, the result of the act becomes related to the legacy inherited. Of course, all that is based on Alexander Vent's basic assumptions for the constructivist approaches to the understanding of the behavior on the international arena of any individual actors, states like Kazakhstan included. But this I would skip for the sake of time. The accumulated normative experience of Kazakhstan that is of relevance here pertains both to the regulatory framework for atomic energy use and radiation safety, and its adaptability. In other words, to what extent Kazakhstan experience is susceptible to export to other countries by means of example or achievements that could be used as benchmarks. Not surprisingly, as elsewhere, the accumulated normative experience is 4 tiers, including the presidential decrees, usually promulgating laws adopted by parliament, the decisions on the collective government, known also as decrees of the Council of Ministers. And then we go further down the hierarchy into the rules and regulations defining radiation safety issues, and opening the field for the blend of technical knowledge plus administrative experience, so to say, and the rules and the regulations are usually the result of normative product by individual agencies so empowered to create them. There is more to that. The fourth layer, the standards, the guidelines, the standard operational procedures, which actually are adopted on the initiative of individual actors from the business field, from the economy, but also from science and research. These examples are numerous, but in Kazakhstan, it seems that 4 laws create the anchors of this system. The one on the use of atomic energy, the radiation safety of the population law, as well as the permits and notification law, not to forget about the environmental code, which is a much larger in scope, but certainly a relevant document. And on the secondary legislation would refer exactly to the type of technical regulations on nuclear safety and the sanitary standards for ensuring radiation safety and various rules on the collection, storage, and disposal of radioactive waste and spent nuclear fuel, as well as, and it is deserves to have a nota-bene sign here on the advanced training, certification, and qualification requirements of personnel. How does this refer to the experience shared? I referred already to mention the project that is led by, in this particular chapter, by Dr. Timur Zhantikin, of the former head of the Kazakh nuclear regulator, and involves studies of the state of affairs and possible recommendations in a number of southern African states, which are on the screen, enumerated on the screen. But what deserves mention here is the fact that the place in the institutional hierarchy in each country could influence, but does not preclude the independence of the nuclear regulator. As I suppose most of the audience know, in Kazakhstan, in fact, the Committee on the Control of the nuclear energy is a part and parcel of the Ministry of Energy, whereas in most other states in Africa, it is not the energy value that makes the nuclear sector of interest. Therefore, you can often find the regulator somehow affiliated to environmental ministries, or even at the Ministry of Employment, which is the case.
4 minutes.
Thank you for this reminder. I would skip then the most of the international conventions which were so successfully implemented in Kazakhstan, and the example in that sense makes really very great asset for the participation of the country in development cooperation designed to support this nexus between energy and development, and prior to that between nuclear applications and development. A few words only on the institutional framework that Kazakhstan disposes with, which is crowned by the Committee on Environmental Regulations and Control, the Committee on Sanitary and Epidemiological Control. Involves, in a way, one would say quite directly, the security services, and also the Committee of Industrial Safety of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, given the the role of that body in the prevention. Industrial Development and Industrial Safety Committee is also plays licensing functions, and all this knowledge and acquired and experience appropriated has been periodically shared with African counterparts, as it is evident from the workshop carried out in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. In terms of bodies other than governmental ones involved, we could really mention the ones that are a product from international cooperations themselves. For example, the IAEA Bank of Low Enriched Uranium, or the Nuclear Security Training Center under the Institute of Nuclear Physics in Alma, which in turn could produce an effect of amplifying the capacity of Kazakhstan to participate in this international exchange. I cannot but underline the role of the Nuclear Technologies Safety Center of the NNC, the Nuclear Center of Kazakhstan, which actually produces paragon of excellence and allows for the approaches to various aspects of this activity, including there are examples of trainings and the public awareness campaigns carried out primarily by a arm of the Nuclear Society of Kazakhstan, which is the Information Center of Future Energy. Just a couple of sentences of this relationship between regional and global dimensions. There is evidence to suggest that Kazakhstan uses the regionality of these problematics in terms of, for example, the conclusion of the Central Asian Nuclear Weapons-Free Zone, which it initiated, but it also uses it as a springboard to become more active and acknowledge international actor globally, as evidenced from its participation in the global partnership against the spread of weapons of mass destruction. There exists one of the so-called gift baskets forms of cooperation of safety in transportation, where there are 4 leading nations: Japan, the United Kingdom in maritime transport, Kazakhstan for railway, and the US for transport. I do not know of any classification that would bring Kazakhstan so high on the international hierarchy. And on this point, I wanted very much to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kamen. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Professor Zarosh Atkanova from Nazarbayev University. Professor Zarosh, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Can the previous speaker please stop sharing their screen?
Yes,
possible. Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Zarosh Atkanova. I work at Nazarbayev University for the School of Mining and Geosciences. So the topic of my today's discussion is Kazakhstan's oil boom and its impact on the service sector. So the outline is as follows. First of all, I'll briefly talk about the motivation for this research. We'll look at some of the features of the oil boom in Kazakhstan. We will also consider some of the features of the value chain in the oil production. And after that, I'll present an analytical framework for my study results and policy implications. So first of all, the focus, most of the attention in my research is given to intermediate services. The examples could be auditing, business consulting, IT services. In other words, these are the services that are consumed by firms, by companies in the process of production. The intermediate services are distinct from final services such as healthcare, education, personal services, in the sense that intermediate services mostly rely on the use of skilled labor. And as we'll see, that plays a very important role in determining the dynamics of the intermediate services versus final services during the oil boom. So the related literature started discussing the importance of intermediate services around late 90s and early 2000s, because evidence was found that active outsourcing of various activities that were initially historically produced within firms to external providers has been very, very important to increasing manufacturing productivity. So intermediate services were found to be extremely important for rising competitiveness of manufacturing in industrialized countries and for increasing trade in manufacturing goods from the OECD countries. So the evidence was overwhelming that indicates that for developing for manufacturing to take advantage of international trade, it's very important for it to have access to a well-functioning intermediate services market. This evidence is very important for many developing and middle-income countries that strive to develop a competitive manufacturing sector. And this is especially important for resource-rich countries because a lot of the government policies specifically aim at manufacturing and other non-oil sectors within their economic diversification policies that are commonly developed and applied during the resource boom. However, given this, on the one hand, long-standing diversification attempts, and on the other hand, rising understanding of the role of intermediate services, there is surprising little knowledge that exists with respect to what kind of dynamics does the service sector, especially the intermediate services sector, exhibit during a resource boom, and whether there are any kind of policy gaps that need to be addressed with respect to the performance of this important sector. As a result, my research evaluated the following three questions, which is: what is the dynamics of the service sector during an oil boom? What may be the causes of the observed behavior in this sector? And what types of specific service sector policies may be recommended to policymakers in resource-rich countries? So let's look at some of the evidence of the oil boom in Kazakhstan. So basically, oil production has started to grow very rapidly since around the middle of the 1990s, which was related to the development of some large oil fields in the western regions, opening up of transportation systems, completion of important oil pipelines in early 2000s, and of course the commodity boom that started around early 2000s. So as a result of all these factors, within roughly 15 years or so, oil production in Kazakhstan has quadrupled. So that represented, of course, a very significant kind of disturbing factor, both in positive and negative sense to the economy. So as we can see, the share of oil in petroleum exports in total exports has very quickly grown from less than 10% to over 60% by around 2013, 2014. At the same time, the oil sector has become the dominant source of government revenues, accounting for over 50% of all government revenues in Kazakhstan. And as we can see, the rates of real GDP growth were moving in step with the performance of the oil sector. So basically, within a very short time, the petroleum sector has become a very important determining factor in economic performance of the country. So there have been quite a few studies that analyze the overall impact of the oil boom on various economic indicators. But as I have mentioned, my interest is in intermediate services sector. So to understand the impact of the oil boom on the service sector, it is important to consider a very complex petroleum value chain. So in order to extract the resources and bring them to final consumers, there are very many stages of the production process that have to take place. So in general, the petroleum sector is divided into the downstream, midstream, and upstream. Upstream, midstream, and downstream sectors, in which we can see presence of both highly specialized services such as exploration and appraisal, oil field services, as well as general business services such as trading, financing, research and development, right? So the data shows that in Kazakhstan's petroleum production, various types of intermediate services represented over a half of all expenditures of petroleum producers on intermediate inputs. So that basically means that as petroleum production was growing at very large pace, a lot of the services were necessary to make this happen. So what kind of impact did this type of production process have on the rest of the firms that also need intermediate services for production purposes? So basically, in the study, I used the analytical framework, a well-known framework of Dutch disease. The modification that I used was introduction of the intermediate services as one of the inputs of the production. And that required modification of the factor movement and spending effects that are associated with the Dutch disease. So basically my hypothesis was that as a result of the oil boom, the intermediate services prices should increase to a greater extent than prices of final services. That's number one. And the ability of non-oil producers to purchase intermediate services will be decreased. So non-oil producers will be crowded out as a result of the oil boom. Okay, so I have run several econometric models. In one set of models, I evaluated the impact of rising oil production on service product prices, evaluating the factor movement effect. And in the second set of models, I evaluated the impact of the rising oil production on expenditures of non-oil producers on intermediate services. So basically the results indicate, they confirm my hypothesis. If I analyze prices of all services versus prices of only intermediate services, then I see that a rising oil production results in higher level of prices for both sets. However, for intermediate services, prices rise faster to a larger extent than for the general set of services, which is explained by the fact that for intermediate services, high skilled labor is necessary, which comes in short supply. If we consider the expenditures of final consumers versus intermediate consumers of services, then we see that the oil boom leads to increasing final service expenditures and decreasing intermediate service expenditures. So that is an indication of crowding out of non-oil producers from the market of intermediate services by rising oil production. So as a result, what are the conclusions of this study? Even though Kazakhstan has undertaken multiple diversification policies that targeted manufacturing, agriculture, and infrastructure, it is necessary to also consider service-specific policies. My study has found out that there are signs of insufficient level of competition among domestic service producers. A lot of the key service sectors such as finance, transportation, telecommunications are highly monopolized. That, of course, reduces the efficiency of the service sector that aggravates this crowding out. Second, Kazakhstan, other studies have found that Kazakhstan has very high barriers for entry to foreign service providers. This has to be addressed and is being addressed within the process of Kazakhstan's WTO accession, but this process has to be dealt with during the oil boom itself. And as intermediate services critically depend on high skill labor, it is necessary to support general skill upgrading to reduce this negative impact of the oil boom on the service sector. So basically, the main message is that general diversification policies have to improve, have to also target efficiency within the service sector, and specifically the intermediate service sector. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Zoresh. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we will play the recorded presentation of Dr. Nazgul. Madip, could you please play? Thank you.
Good morning, dear participants and organizers of the conference. Happy to see you here. Hope you are doing well. My name is Gulnaz Kazmukhambetova. I'm a second-year master's student in Department of Tourism at Eurasian National University after Gumilyov. My today's topic is implementing mass sports and leisure policy in accordance with Sustainable Development Goals and its implications in Kazakhstan. To start from the reason of choosing this topic, I would like to say that after graduating with International Relations, Political Science and History degree from Nazarbayev University, I had 2 years of work experience in international hospitality company Marriott International and played a role of property champion for Take Care Wellbeing program. And this corporate example showed a very well thought and a considerable program for holistic and individual well-being programs to associate. Therefore, this continuing interest brought me for studying masters at this direction and bringing this presentation to you. Background for this topic was emerged from the global influence of COVID-19 on sport, physical activity and well-being policies for social development in various countries, and the emphasis of this question in 2020's President's message, where priorities for mass sport, physical culture development were addressed. And the definitions for this were taken from Law of the Republic of Kazakhstan on physical culture and sports accordingly. For leisure, the definition sounds as time or opportunity for ease, relaxation, etc. And Sustainable Development Goals, considering good health, well-being, quality education, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, and peace, justice and strong institutions were taken. The given research attempts to analyze and fill the literature gap regarding the given topic in context of Kazakhstan and suggests strategies for effective implementation of mass sports and leisure policy via analyzing existing state of it, and international case studies, evaluation of their implementation via past analysis, analyzing current national plan via stages model, and indicating accordance of the stages with sustainable development goals are going to be presented. 3 countries at different stages of development were chosen as international cases. They are People's Republic of China with National Fitness Program, Republic of Korea with Sports Program, and Germany with well-developed sports clubs culture. And most impact of National Fitness Program in China had on reducing inequalities development goal. In Republic of Korea, it mostly affected on quality education. And in Germany, it influenced on good health and well-being aspect of sustainable development goals. A strong feature of South Korean example is in combination of leisure and sports program into one curriculum and giving opportunity to develop people professionally in the field. A strong feature of Germany is in strong economic autonomy of sports clubs and high involvement of population. While in China, it's a more complex phenomenon and had a vast transformation since 1949. It made it inclusive to the urban and rural population, to the youth and elderly, and established it as a constitutional right. A particularly successful case could be observed in Guangzhou, where obesity issue and the SARS epidemic triggered quicker implementation of mass sports policy. Guangzhou was able to effectively use sport venues after Asian Games, create instruction stations, certify social sports instructors, create leisure and well-being index in the evaluation of the quality of life, which had a positive effect not only on economic performance, but also on ecology as well. Moving towards mass sports policy in Kazakhstan, it was mentioning that there were no many legal acts concerning this question. And the national plan for 2020 and 2025 was triggered by COVID-19 effect. And nowadays, despite stepping towards implementation stage, it returned back to formulation. And a special project group, YELUMT, is working on creation of better strategy and agenda setting regarding this question. Legitimation stage took place by regulatory legal act on eGov national portal. However, participation of citizens was not active. Implementation stage shows interconnection of mass sports and leisure. For example, Art Sport Edu website gives opportunity for children to join sports or art clubs and allows parents to evaluate the provided service. The issue on implementation stage is non-governmental budget. It is distributed by quasi-governmental one fund, which undermines economic autonomy and sustainability. Evaluation stage by sociological research is planned for December of this year and 2023. However, there is no coordinated monitoring strategy presented yet. Leisure policy in Kazakhstan is not yet developed as a separate article. However, it's closely connected with mass sport initiatives as street workout zones, complex plan for development of city, and the need in it will be increased with development of infrastructure. It was mentioning an important role of digitalization on legitimation, implementation, and evaluation stages as a discussion platforms, as a platform for getting the feedback from users and quickening the operations, as well as a monitor of transparency regarding the budget delivery. There are several major issues in mass sports and leisure service delivery in Kazakhstan. Weak detailed strategy, delegation of responsibility by ministries, absence of strong infrastructure, lack of experts on the topic, holding finance in one actor's hands, absence of evaluation criteria are amongst them. As a policy is under development, there are limitations on evaluation of their efficiency. Another limitations include lack of Kazakhstani scientific literature and insufficient statistics available openly. I intend to study post-Soviet countries' cases and their public-private partnership strategies due to closeness of historical development of current topic. I would like to conclude with the remark that internationally, transformation of mass sports policy is shifting towards physical and mental, emotional, social, spiritual well-being and the holistic development of individuals within society. And for Kazakhstan, as a young developing country, it is very beneficial to consider those transformations at the moment of implementation in order to catch those trends and do the right decisions. Implementation is a key stage, and it should consider all the geographic, climatic, infrastructural, social nuances for carrying out them effectively on every level of the community. Think tank Yelumete, working under Prime Minister's Project Office, nowadays is one of innovative approaches that united professionals of interconnected disciplines for building more considerable policies, and implementing their suggestions effectively would influence on further success of the mass sports policy in Kazakhstan. Final conclusions and evaluations of the program could be made after the planned end date. However, the possibility of adding a positive impact at the moment of execution could make the process more politically, economically, and socially efficient. Sport is a symbol of social development and progress. We will hope that Kazakhstan could be successful in it due to timely, effective policy and unity of actions. Thank you very much for attention. We'll be happy to answer for your questions.
Thank you very much. We have time for 2 to 3 burning questions. Please keep your questions very brief and name the professor you want to ask the question from. Kanat, please go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Kanat first.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Iftikhar. I have a question for Zavresh Atakhanova. I have a question on the effects of oil boom at the regional level. My question is, which regions are affected more by the oil boom and why? Thank you.
Okay, so the focus of my research was analyzing the impact on the overall service sector. If we were to try to use regional data, we would have some issues with kind of econometric estimations because of very limited type of data. So I could only evaluate country level effects.
No. Yeah, I understand it, but in your view, maybe you know something about at the regional level. Which
at the regional level, there is a paper, 2014 paper from me and Professor Howie that evaluated the regional impacts of the resource boom on one of the socioeconomic indicators, which is inequality. So I can send you a link to that paper after the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second would be Mr. Serik Muratayev.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Serik Muratayev. I'm from Uzbekistan, more precisely from Tashkent State University of Law. I have a question to our first lecturer, Professor Sharipova. We know one of the important matter which can influence to well-being of population is debt. And we know most of Central Asian countries have external debts. What about Kazakhstan's external debt? How population sense the external debt? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. I'll just say what I think, but maybe my co-author Alma will add. So I guess we know that the external debt is big in Kazakhstan and it's growing, but I'm not sure, we have not included this variable into our model, and I don't know how it can actually influence people's perceptions, because our data set is world value survey and it is based mostly on perceptions, what people think, and there was no such question about external debt. But I think that overall people might not be very satisfied that this debt is growing, but I'm not sure how it might impact on their daily life.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for at least 2 more questions. If
One.
Okay, one.
Jana had a question, Jana Kapenova. Or so I thought. No, we have no more
Sorry,
questions.
professors, it
We
was
have one more
confusion.
hand here.
No, it's Fatima. Sorry.
Fatima.
Fatima has a question.
Hello, thank you for your presentations. I want to ask from Professor Sharipova. You said that the people's well-being was affected by financial constraints. So what do you suggest how to solve it? Because that was the main argument. You gave other suggestions, but what about in terms of financial area, what can the country do? The government to increase well-being?
I don't know if just say the banal things that maybe the government should increase salaries, you know, or kind of improve the situation in the financial situation of the people. Alma, maybe you can add something. Alma?
Thank you, Dina. So the question was based on what is the policies can be applied by government for improve the financial satisfaction of the population. It's not only salaries. I think it's here the subjective opinion of the population. So we cannot say only salary could be the main issue. All other issues can influence because it's only subjective opinion of the individual about their financial situation. Maybe he's better off in real terms, but a subjective opinion will be different. So it's not only like wages can influence on subjective well-being, I think. So it's other issues like freedoms of choice, trust, and other issues here becomes more important in case of Kazakhstan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If no more questions, I would like to thank all the participants. Thank you very much for a very lively session. And you can get in touch with all the presenters if you have a greater interest in the topic. There would be some proceedings published. And the session 2 link is already in the chat. Thank you, Professor Riccardo Pelizzo. 11 o'clock, our second session would start. We will try to start at sharp 11. So please, all of you, see you again at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much. And if I can have a round of applause just on behalf of everyone for all the presenters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.